Rishi Sunak is the new UK Prime Minister, and back home here in India, it has led to a political war of words between the BJP and the Congress. Joining me now on this special broadcast is senior Congress leader Shashi Tharoor. Dr. Tharoor, really appreciate your time, and your tweet has set off a storm. One may say that this invocation of majoritarian angle in Rishi Sunak's elevation is superficial, sir.
Well, look, I mean, the fact is that they have overlooked a fundamental question of race, that he is a brown-skinned person. He is not of Anglo-Saxon stock or English stock or Scots stock or anything like that. He is somebody of Indian origin. And the British, who were notorious and justifiably so for their racial discrimination for a couple of centuries of imperial conquest and rule, a country that used to have racial restrictions on who could enter their clubs in India and Africa till half a century, 60 years ago. Such a country has been able to outgrow the worst of its own prejudices to actually create a situation where a brown man can become prime minister. I think that's an extraordinary achievement. Secondly, they've overlooked his religion. I mean, he is an overtly practicing Hindu, proud of his faith, takes his oath on the Bhagavad Gita. He is somebody who, even when campaigning for the Tory party leadership a couple of months ago, tweeted pictures of himself performing a cow puja and praying to Lord Krishna on Janmashtami. This is somebody who's absolutely overtly proud of practicing a faith which is not only not the majority faith in Britain, but is actually at odds with the established church there, which is, as you know, the Anglican Christian church. So here you've got somebody who's a double minority, as it were, and the British have been able to overlook their prejudices and take him on.
Yes.
I would really like to see the Hindutvavadis of the BJP being prepared to embrace somebody who comes from a different ethnicity, such as, for example, you remember when Sonia Gandhi was offered the premiership by her victorious coalition in 2004, you remember what the BJP said then, and the BJP leader wanted to shave her head and go on dharna outside Parliament. And then if there's somebody who goes outside the Indic religions, because Hindutva has always said that Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, they're all the same, they're all their holy land is this land, but anyone from anywhere else is actually a foreigner in our country.
Okay.
Would they embrace somebody who's an overtly practicing Muslim or Christian as Prime Minister?
Dr.
I'm
Tharoor,
asking this in all genuineness. Yes. I'm not saying that it's... I think we have to acknowledge that what's happened is very different from what would happen here.
But Dr. Tharoor, what the BJP is saying is, and it's reminding you of Indian history, that India has had 3 presidents from the minority communities. Dr. Zakir Hussain, the 3rd president of India, was a Muslim. Justice Hidayatullah, who acted as an acting president.
I know Indian history, Maria.
Yes, of course. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, Gyani Zail Singh.
But we also know that the presidency... We also know the presidency is a largely ceremonial office and contains absolutely no power. The Prime Minister holds the power in this country. We know that very well, which is why it's possible for them to appoint to Rashtrapati Bhavan figures who do represent in many ways the diversity we'd like to celebrate in our country. It's wonderful to have an Adivasi president. We've had 2 Dalit presidents. We've had 3 Muslim presidents. All of this is a very good thing because it signifies that we can use this very high office, high in prestige but low in power, to use that office for such purposes. But when it comes to real power, we have had the Prime Ministership held only by Hindus, with one exception being a Sikh, but most Hindus would not regard that as such an exception as it would be to have someone from a quote-unquote non-Indic religion. Now, this is what is remarkable, I think, about what the Brits have done. I'm no Anglophile. I've written about British racism. I've written about British imperialism. I've been uncompromising in my criticism of that. But I have to admit that one has to take one's hat off for recognizing that they were able to outgrow their long decades and centuries of racial prejudice. They were able to overcome their religious scruples, and they were able to say, let's look at the merit of this individual and go for him, whatever his racial and religious background.
Okay.
And not to mention his age. I mean, in India, let's ask you, Maria, this is a guy who got elected for the first time in 2015. He's been 7 years an MP.
Yes.
7 years, and within 5 years he became finance minister. Within 7 years he became prime minister. In any ruling party in India, he'd be lucky to be an MOS at that time. So that too is a remarkable thing. So when I say, could it happen in India? You should look at race, you should look at religion, you should look at age and experience.
Okay.
We have, I think, valuable lessons to learn about how merit and ability should trump such considerations, and
Yes.
they don't in our country.
I'm going
in
to
our
talk
country's
about
politics,
the
and they
age
do
factor
Britain
in just a
this
bit,
particular
Dr.
instance.
Tharoor, since tomorrow it will be the day when Mallikarjun Kharge will be formally taking charge as the Congress president, and you have said that the change has already begun in your party because you contested against him. Dr. Tharoor, we have had Dr. Manmohan Singh. You yourself talked about it. He was a Sikh born in an undivided India. He was the prime minister for 10 long years. Let me remind you again, I'm sure you know your history very, very well, sir, and you can teach me as well. But you have had Justice Muhammad Hidayatullah, a Muslim. Then you have Sam Piroj Barucha, a Parsi as Chief Justice of India. We have also had Fatima Bibi, a Muslim, as Judge of the Supreme Court way back in 1989. So history has shown that India may have overcome its prejudices much before Great Britain. Would you not agree with me?
No, we certainly have been able rightly to showcase our diversity. It's simply that the office of Prime Minister is in a different league. I mean, Britain is also able to point to the so-called great offices of state, that is the Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, Home Minister and Prime Minister, that they've held. People of color, people both of brown descent and black descent have held those positions before. So it's not just those positions. It's the prime ministership, the most powerful office in the land, the person who appoints other ministers, the person in whom confidence has to be expressed by the House. That is a category by itself, Maria, and therefore we can point to chief justices, for that matter, cricket captains. But the fact is that nothing comes up to match the position of Prime Minister. And I think Dr. Manmohan Singh was certainly a very, very important. I'm a great fan of Dr. Manmohan Singh's. I think his being Prime Minister was, again, a recognition of his extraordinary ability and capability as one of the leading policy economists in the world. But the fact still is that most Hindus do not have a problem with the idea of a Sikh or a Jain or a Buddhist, because they see this all as Indic religions. The Hindutvavadis are explicit in saying that it's only those whose Punya Bhumi is in this land whom they consider to be authentic. So what happens if a Muslim or a Christian who practices their faith as overtly as Rishi Sunak practices his wanted to be Prime Minister of India? Would the BJP welcome that? I'd love to see it. If they do, then at that point I'll take my hat off to them and say shabash. But I don't think they're there yet, and I certainly don't see any candidate like that in the offing when you haven't got a single Muslim MP in either House of Parliament. This is really something which has never been the case in the past. All those examples you mentioned come from a past, by and large, where others were in power, including my party, not theirs.
But Dr. Tharoor, the BJP says that this is essentially intellectual bankruptcy of opposition, and that is the reason why these equivalences or analogies are being drawn.
Well, let them refute the specific points that I have made, and then we can see. I've just been answering your questions and concerns, Maria, one after the other. These are the points they've made. My answers, I believe, are convincing. I mean, the fact is that, party spokesmen can toss phrases like intellectual bankruptcy. I don't think that my bank is entirely rupt yet, so I'm quite happy to take it on through you.
So, but let me also look at what has been said. The BJP has thrown a challenge at Mehbooba Mufti. Will you accept a minority in Jammu and Kashmir as Chief Minister of the state? Will you be able to take that question? Yes, I know. Will you be taking that question?
No, I think you should ask Mehbooba, because it's a question clearly directed at a Kashmiri Muslim politician to answer. And I'm neither Kashmiri nor Muslim, so I'll pass on that.
Yes, but Dr. Tharoor, talking about the larger diversity and multiculturalism, many are saying that today, of course, Rishi Sunak has taken charge in UK as the Prime Minister, and it's a big day for Indians world over, because this is also showcasing the long miles that Britain would have travelled in accepting, in giving an institution of that nature to someone who is of Indian origin, a country which sent viceroys to India for several years. Would you say that this is a necessary debate beginning today?
Well, I don't know there's much to debate. I think we have to acknowledge that what they've done is truly extraordinary at multiple levels. They've overlooked race, they've overlooked religion, they've overlooked age, and they've basically just focused on merit at a time when, frankly, their economy is in the doldrums. They've had a world-class financial crisis. Their last prime minister, outgoing prime minister, resigned after the shortest tenure ever recorded of any prime minister in the history of the office in Britain. Given all of that, they wanted a safe pair of hands, somebody who could be counted upon to stabilize the economy, to steer the ship of the British economy in the right direction. And they saw that they had a Chancellor of the Exchequer who'd done a good job, and here he was with experience on Wall Street, experience in the city, former hedge fund, former Chancellor. They said, let's go for him. I think it was really a classic instance of people saying merit trumps every other consideration. Whereas very often in politics, including international politics, merit is not the only consideration. Very often people go for these other thoughts. But clearly the British MPs of the Conservative Party said, either we recognize that this man is a man who can save us, or we face a general election where we're going to get clobbered because the Labour Party is 38% ahead of us in the polls. And with that, they took their decision. I think that actually is to their credit. It doesn't guarantee that Rishi will succeed. It doesn't guarantee that they will still be able to face the electorate against the Labour Party in the foreseeable future. But they've got a couple of years, 2.5 years before an election is due. Maybe Rishi can pull it off. And certainly, as a well-wisher and a friend, I wish him well. I hope he can do it.
Dr. Tharoor, tomorrow is when Mallikarjun Kharge takes formally, charge of the grand old party. You are building an argument for merit. You have also spoken about age. Would you say that the grand old party was not ready for a young leader in you?
Look, an election was fought. The voters voted. They chose Mr. Kharge. I bow to their judgment. I think that's something that in any election, a decent loser has to absolutely acknowledge that he lost, and I acknowledge that. I think that that makes this question academic because Mr. Kharge's experience and his long track record was clearly what was valued by the almost 8,000 voters within the Congress Party delegates who put him there. And I wish him well, and I'll be there tomorrow morning to watch him being sworn in and wish him all the very best.
Before I let you go, since you're making an argument, Dr. Tharoor, about merit being the primary issue here, merit trumping everything else, the BJP says merit, not minority, is something that the Congress is forgetting.
No, but this is something that I am, as a Congress MP, am underscoring. It was merit that really won Rishi Sunak the job. If he didn't have the merit, then certainly all the other factors we've discussed might have loomed larger. But when merit comes first, you overlook these other factors of race, religion, age, and so on. And Tory MPs did that. And I think this is entirely to be applauded. I might add that one more thing that I would applaud is their extraordinary capacity to outgrow their own worst prejudices. I'd like to see the BJP outgrow some of their prejudices that they have manifested in the last few years. It'll be good for them and it'll be good for our country.
But sir, when you say merit, not minority, if that is the criteria, the BJP's argument is that that is what they have also believed in so far.
Look, they have believed in merit according to them, and we can debate the individual merits of the people they've supported. But they cannot claim to have been, minority blind, as it were, because they have been, unfortunately, unleashing a kind of bulldozer politics against minorities, which, frankly, have left a number of people in our population deeply troubled and insecure. I don't think it's fair to imply that they have merely been promoting people on the basis of merit and not discriminating against others on the basis of religion, because sadly, their track record in the last few years would suggest otherwise.
Dr. Shashi Tharoor, always a pleasure to speak to you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for answering all those questions about the storm and is it really in a teacup that you started this morning with that tweet. Thank you so much.
All the best, Maria. Take care. Thank you.